Yeah. That thing is wicked.
Hello, I'm Judson Graham. I've been a paramotor pilot for nearly 7 years and been flying the FLARE Moustache for the past 3 years. I am excited to share with you the new FLARE Prop, a FLARE wing designed specifically for paramotoring.
Yeah.
These videos serve as a paramotor-specific supplement to the wonderful videos in the FLARE Academy specifically created for the Moustache. I encourage you to watch those alongside this video as they will give more in-depth information on how the FLARE system works. Most of this video will be more of a quick start guide for paramotor pilots and the differences between a regular paramotoring wing and the FLARE Prop. Now I'm sure you're very excited to get this thing out of the bag, clipped into your paramotor, and go fly it, but it is very important that you watch this video first because there are some specific things about the FLARE Prop that are different than any other wing you've flown. The FLARE Prop is a parakite designed with a very strong reflex profile. And instead of using the drag created by the brakes to turn as a traditional paraglider or paramotor wing does, it uses the entire angle of attack of the wing to change direction. This allows the glider to have a much larger speed range than a traditional paraglider, which is normally locked to whatever the trim setting is. For the people who've flown high-performance reflexed paramotoring wings, think of the FLARE Prop like having the entire speed bar range in your hands. The FLARE Prop will unlock all sorts of new dynamic flying for you, allowing you to fly faster, low than you ever have before, and with the ability to punch out and turn the speed you've gathered into altitude very quickly. In the first section of this video, I'd like to compare the FLARE Prop to a standard paramotoring wing. Most people these days are flying a reflexed paramotor wing. These wings have a few ways to change speed. We have our trimmers that change the angle of attack by lifting and pulling down the rear risers, and we have our speed bar, which pulls down on the A risers to change the angle of attack of the wing. The FLARE Prop combines these two systems into the brake toggles. To go faster, you'll raise your hands up. To go slower, you'll pull your hands down. You can use the brake toggles in conjunction to turn by either pulling on one side and or raising the outside into the turn. You can get a very dramatic turn out of the FLARE Prop by simply raising the outside hand. The FLARE Prop is a reflexed wing through and through, so all of these same safety considerations that we make for reflexed paramotoring wings need to be made for the FLARE Prop. This includes not touching the main brakes, the main line going to the trailing edge of the wing, really at all. You should only be controlling the FLARE Prop from the brake toggles. You can think of touching the main brake lines on the FLARE Prop like pulling brakes fully accelerated on a reflex paramotoring wing. It will induce a collapse in flight and will not be controllable on the ground. Don't do it. The FLARE Prop's default hands-off position is also fully accelerated. You can think of letting go of the brake toggles on the FLARE Prop like pushing full speed bar with your trimmers out on your wing. You'll be going very fast both forwards and with a high sync rate. It's important that if you have to let go of the toggles, you do so with plenty of altitude and are on your throttle so you do not sink excessively fast. The FLARE Prop also features a 2D steering system with tip steer for improved roll response with some adjustment features that we'll talk about in a little bit. Let's talk about the inflation, both in forward and reverse. While the in-flight characteristics may be learned fairly easily, it's very important that we cover a few of the launching and landing techniques for this wing, as these will be the most different compared to a regular paraglider. We'll start with the forward inflation. The FLARE Prop has been designed specifically to inflate very well in low wind situations. This is a huge improvement over the Moustache. Care must be taken on the FLARE Prop to clip in correctly and make sure there are no tension knots on the upper cascade. A knot causing deformation to the wing will have significantly worse consequences on the FLARE Prop than on other paramotoring wings. It's very important that you do not hold the A's at the malleons. Instead, you want to hold the A's at the point where the A riser sews into the rest of the riser, really low down. It's very important when you clip into forward to make sure that your risers aren't twisted. If they're twisted, you could lock up the pulleys. So just do a line check, make sure your A is clear, and then come around from the inside. You'll want to place the A again at this knot, not up here. If you hold them up at the malleons, the wingtips will not inflate and it will hang back longer. Hold them low and keep your arms very far back. The wing does not need a lot of A pressure to inflate and will come up easily. One unique characteristic of the FLARE wings is their unique pitch stability. When you inflate it, you don't need to worry so much about checking the surge, fearing that it will overfly you. It's better to just keep your hands up and let it overfly you slightly and settle back into its normal configuration, or use a strong direct brake input that goes into the main brake range to keep it where you want it. A medium brake pressure input may in fact cause a front tuck. For reverse inflations with the FLARE prop, you'll want to hold both your risers with the A's on top and the left and right letter tabs facing outwards with the letters facing you. Then flip your risers in whatever direction you like and clip in like normal. If you've never motored a Moustache, or if this is your first time on a Parakite, launching will be a little bit different than you're used to. This wing will create virtually no lift with your hands up. It is important to get off the ground to bring your hands down to the point where the main brakes engage, and perhaps slightly further than that. I highly suggest kiting the glider in forward and reverse before you attempt to launch it, because this is not so intuitive the first time, and doing it under the high speed, high stress environment of a no wind forward inflation is almost certainly going to lead to a failed launch. As you roll onto the throttle, you'll bring your hands down. The brake pressure between hands up and the point where the main brakes engage is very linear. It will be very distinct where you hit the main brakes and you feel the wing start to create significantly more lift. You want to be familiar with this position before you attempt to take off and bring yourself into that position. So hands up will be your full fast position. As you bring the toggles down, you'll feel the brake pressure be progressive and about the same, and then you'll hit the main brake range where it'll get firmer. Get familiar with this location. This is where you want to be taking off, not up here. You won't take off. Another important thing to note when you take off is immediately after takeoff, our usual reaction is to bring our hands up to the pulleys. On the FLARE prop, we advise not to do that. The wing will not climb well, if at all, depending on your motor, if you bring your hands up, and you may find yourself back on the ground. It's important to maintain that point where the brakes are just engaged so the wing is creating its maximum lift as you climb out. This can be a little bit unnerving at first, as holding some brake pressure while we're taking off goes against what we've been taught in training. This is okay on the FLARE. Please, when you take off, hold that brake pressure, or at least somewhere in the bottom third of the FLARE range, and climb to an altitude of 300 meters or 1,000 feet before you attempt any maneuvers, so you have some margin to feel out how fast the wing will dive and how fast it will lose altitude. I promise you this wing will lose altitude very fast. If you let your hands up when you take off, you will come back down to the ground. Don't do it. Similarly, with landing, the FLARE prop will behave slightly different. It is important that you come in with some speed on landing. You don't necessarily need to be fully hands up, but you don't want to be coming into your FLARE with your brakes all the way at the bottom of the FLARE range already. The FLARE prop will have the longest, deepest brake range you've ever felt in your life if you come into your landing hands up. But if you come into your landing with your brakes already at the point where the main brakes meet, you won't have much left and you're going to come down hard. So when you come into your FLARE for landing, get out of your seat, let the wing accelerate slightly into the middle or upper third of the flare range and slowly come into that flare range and feel how the wing levels out. I would recommend doing this a few times with altitude first to get a feel for how responsive the brakes will be. A few inches or a few centimeters of pull at the top of the range will easily level you out. It's going to be a very slow waiting game to allow all of the energy and speed from the wing to dissipate. Be patient and plan significantly more distance in front of your landing. It's very, very likely you'll overshoot your landing point by 10 to 20 meters or 50 to 100 feet. Finally, let's talk about the brake adjustment options. There is a ladder option to either tighten or loosen the tip steer line. The higher you put the tip steer line on the ladder, the less tip steer authority you'll have, which will lead to a slightly subdued roll response. The lower you put the tip steer toggle, the more direct the tip steer response will be, and the more direct the roll response will be as well. Keep in mind that with the tip steer tied tightly, the wing will have the tendency to stall from the wing tips first and horseshoe behind you. Whereas when the tip steer lines are loose, the wing will stall from the center first and have less of a tendency to horseshoe. It may be useful, especially in free flight, to have the tip steer line slightly longer, where we might use flapping or some kind of technique where we're very near or inside the stall point to reduce altitude on landing, and we wouldn't want the wing to pitch back and stall in a horseshoe configuration. There is also a knot ladder on the main brake line. If we have the main brake line on the longest setting, the brake feel will be softer, but it will be harder to feel the stall. If we have the brake line on the shortest setting, it will be a firmer brake pressure and more easy to stall the wing. In summary, the FLARE prop is going to surely be a unique and exciting paramotoring experience that's different than any other wing you've flown. It's going to allow you to fly very low and very fast and carve very aggressive lines. It is extraordinarily important to me that you take the proper precautions before flying this wing to learn its unique characteristics. Please, please take considerable time kiting this wing before you fly it to get familiar with the FLARE system and how the brakes feel, where the point where maximum lift is on takeoff, where the stall point is, and practice avoid using the main brake lines. When you do decide to fly this wing for the first time, please, please take off and climb to a safe altitude before you try any maneuvers. This wing is going to be very dynamic. Even in a size that you're very comfortable with, it will dive faster and lose altitude faster than any other wing you've flown. Practice your landing approaches. Don't commit to your first landing. Come in with power on and be ready to go around if you don't like the way it feels. Understand that this profile is not infallible. It is very stable in turbulence, but can collapse. Do not intentionally fly it in rough air. Ease into aggressive maneuvers. This wing handles differently than all the other wings you've flown. And finally, if you have the opportunity, try it for the first time in a much larger size. We have found with the FLARE Moustache that even in the bigger sizes, they don't get less fun. They just fly differently and will suit a different variety of conditions. If you start on a very small FLARE prop, the speed and the dive might be so overwhelming that you don't understand how the FLARE system works, and you're basically just fighting for your life the whole time to fly it. Try the big size first so you can see how the risers move and how the wing accelerates and slows down and pitches up before you move to the really small one. Another motor-specific warning, especially if you're a light pilot on a big glider or have a strong engine, be very careful of the possibility of a power stall. This wing can pitch up just by pulling the brakes to angles that would be close to or exceeding your full throttle climb rate. So especially if we're at full throttle with our hands up, be very careful if you decide to immediately pull the brakes down and hold full throttle. The wing is going to pitch very far behind you and put you at a very, very high angle of attack. I recommend slowly easing into the brakes as you leave the ground. or easing off the throttle to prevent yourself from pitching up too far. As a rule of thumb, anything over 45 degrees is starting to get excessive and should be approached with extreme caution. I hope you enjoy your time with your FLARE prop. There are some moments where it's going to be the best thing you've ever flown, especially with light wind doing touch and goes, swoop landings, or carving down low in perfectly smooth air. Please be safe and understand that this is different than anything else you've flown, and take the necessary precautions to be a smart, competent pilot so you can fly for years to come. I've been Judson Graham. Thank you very much.